Welcome to Communication, Connection, Community, the Podcaster's Podcast. This podcast takes a deep dive into modern-day communication strategies in the podcasting space. We chat with interesting people who make the podcasting and speaking spaces exciting and vibrant. We also dive into the podcasting community with news, updates, latest trends and topics from this ever-evolving space. So strap in. It's going to be one amazing ride. Let's dive into today's episode. And my guest today is Rosemarie Francis. She's the producer and host of not one, not two, but three podcasts. She began her broadcasting journey in 2014 when she started an online radio station, very cool, to encourage single moms on their journey. She was recently nominated as a featured podcaster on ihaveapodcast.com. I love that. That sounds like a very cool name in itself. As a member of Podcasters Paradise, she mentored the host of The Prison Post before he started the show. So she now mentors aspiring podcasters while continuing to hone her craft through her meetup group. In addition to her meetup group, Rosemarie Francis also publishes Nonprofit Podcasting, which is a monthly newsletter for nonprofits who want to start a podcast, which we'll be talking about that today, I'm sure. She also created the Podcast Incubator, where aspiring podcasters can learn about the tools and strategies used in podcasting. So I am so thrilled that she's here today because it seems like we're cut from a similar piece of cloth. We both eat, sleep, breathe, love podcasting. So Rosemarie Francis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So broadcasting, that's what brought you into the podcast space. Let's go back in time a little bit and tell me about that journey into starting that online radio station. Tell me how that came to be.
So I was looking for a solution. And I was a divorced mom. Like all divorced mom or single moms, you have to be innovative. And so I was looking for a way to get the stories off moms who are struggling to raise their children, to get those stories out. And online radio was the first thing that I found when I was doing the research. But then I accidentally bumped into John Lee Dumas on his Entrepreneur on Fire. And that started my journey into podcasting.
And I like how you framed that because you said that you were looking for a solution. Isn't that always the way? We're looking for a solution. If something isn't out there, there's two things people do. Go, oh, well, it's not out there and move on. But you actually created the solution, and that was the online radio show. And yeah, John Lee Dumas, of course, very instrumental in the early days of podcasting. And what was the catalyst that led you from online radio into podcasting? Was it just a natural transition from one to the other? Or was it something that you one day said, you know what, online radio is great, but podcasting is better? What was it, if you recall?
So it wasn't that online radio was great. I found it complicated. And it seemed like there was a wall, right? I was wondering how I was going to get through the guests or the audience. So I couldn't find that way to build that connection with the audience using an online radio. And it could be just I didn't know, right? But podcasting just seemed like a natural fit for Solo Moms Talk, which was the first podcast. And that's why I did it. I just said, well, this doesn't seem to be working, so let's try this.
And the success, of course, has been phenomenal because you're still doing it, not with the first podcast, but you've added two more that you said. What are the other two podcasts?
Okay, so you mentioned that I was co-mentoring someone in Podcasters Paradise while I was working on Solo Moms Talk. And I realized that I actually knew what I was talking about with podcasting because I was doing it. I was editing, I was doing the guesting, I was doing everything. And the gentleman would ask me a question, it was automatic, I would answer. I was like, man, I like this stuff. And I know this stuff. And so I started Tools of the Podcast Trade because I realized people were struggling with starting a podcast. You know, what mic do I use? How do I get it online? Like, how do I get it up? You know? And so that's why I started Tools of the Podcast Trade to talk about the tools and strategies we use in podcasting. So then the third podcast we could talk about later if you want. That's something more personal, and which is why I love podcasting so much, because instead of blogging or journaling, you could use a podcast to get your message out.
Yeah, what I like about podcasting too, and I think you hit the nail right on the head, is it's so easy to get the word out, easier than that appointment tuning of online radio. I spent 25 years in terrestrial radio, so I understand the complication and the setup
Hmm.
and it's very different now than it was even when I was
Yes.
in broadcasting, but it still seems like it's one heck of a climb versus podcasting, which is there's so much out there from a listener perspective, but there's so much opportunity as well
Hmm.
from a host perspective or from a business perspective. We're going to talk about the not-for-profit route in just a moment, but I just want to ask you things that you've learned along the way in your journey, because you are a mentor. That's what you do. That's one of the things that you do. What are some of the reasons why people are coming to you? Is it the confusion of podcasting? Is it they're not sure about content? Or is it a number of reasons why they're coming to you and asking you for help?
I think it's a number of reasons, but if I may, I crafted like a 3 point tools, like the most important tools that you need in podcasting. And then my number one tool is mindset. And I find that a lot of people who come and talk to me, they aren't talking about, even though they talk about what mic do I use or how do I get it up online, things like that. It's not about any of those things. It's about what's blocking them or what they perceive to be this big, mysterious world of podcasting, right? And so when people come to me and ask me a question, I kind of listen to what they're saying and realize it's not about what they're asking me. It's just about what's stopping them, that lizard brain, that imposter syndrome, that's stopping them from moving from A to B, basically.
Is it also, in your experience, it's mindset, yes, but is it also perception of what they need to do or what people are perceiving a podcast, the workflow, you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned mindset and imposter syndrome, but is it also the perception of what podcasting is or what it can do? Does that come into play at all?
Yeah, I believe so. And I have to blame some of our, professionals about that, because if I hadn't been doing it all this time, I probably would have walked away, because some of these high-level podcasters, they have these methods and strategies, and you're looking at it going, there's no way I could do that. I'm just trying to speak my truth, right? And so I think that this perception that, you have to be Joe Rogan or John Lee Dumas or whomever is what blocks a lot of people.
Mhm.
I was talking to a woman for 3 years, and she's an accountant, and she wants to teach people how to avoid being scammed, right?
Mhm.
This woman for 3 years messed with spreadsheets because that's what she was used to. And I'm saying, I thought you wanted to start a podcast. And she said, yes, I want to start a podcast, but I want to show them on the spreadsheet. And I couldn't get through to her that, no, that's not how you do it. Because she had this concept that that was going to work for her. So, things like that.
Yeah, I always share with people when I'm working with them, it's how do you take that content? I have something similar that I use. I use the 5 myths, 5 reasons why people aren't starting podcasts. And one of them is because of content. I don't have enough content. Where's that content going to come from? And I always say it's not about content creation because it exists. Everyone has content. Everyone. It's about content curation. How do you take that content, in your example, the spreadsheets for instance, and turn that into content for a podcast? So you're right; those roadblocks can definitely be jarring for people. And the other thing too is you're right with those high level podcasts, with we'll call them superstars of the in the podcasting space, I guess. They have $75,000, $100,000 studios and a production team and a producer, and somebody is bringing them coffee every hour. So that's high level, high level. most people, and I know you know this because you work with them on a regular basis, most people aren't there. Most people are using podcasts as a way to get the word out about what it is that they do, or their passion project, or their community endeavors, all of those things. And the famous or the fortuned or the celebrity or guru style podcasts, that's probably less than 0.5% of the podcasts that are out there. So if we look at that as that's what you want to aspire to, that's one thing. But certainly don't let that deter you from getting into the space, because most of the podcasts out there aren't anywhere near that same level, in the sense of those people have started their journey years ago in podcasting and maybe even in business, so they can justify and excel to a high level podcast. Most of us aren't there.
And I'd like to add that we don't have to be there, right? Pat Flynn talks about people who, want 10,000 or 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have 100 people in a room to talk to address, to meet their needs, you have a lot of people in that room, right? And as long as you're meeting the needs of your audience, that's what matters. And so if we could bring it down a little bit, and focus on that, what I call your podcast avatar, that one person you're talking to, I think that will bring some kind of perspective to the message that you as a podcaster is trying to convey.
I love what you just said. I need to, clone you and carry you around, but have you follow me everywhere I go, because I say this to people all the time coming into the podcasting space, and they want the big numbers. They want the 10,000 downloads per episode. Is that possible? Yes. Is it going to happen usually within your first 6 months or even 2 years? Likely not. But is it possible? Yes, it is. I have clients that have those numbers, but they didn't start there. And most people, you're right, don't get there. And I always use that analogy about, because I also work with some speakers, and I'll say, what if you could speak in front of 100 people, and that that's your ideal your audience, that's your avatar, and you're guaranteed, because it's your ideal client or avatar, there's a good chance that they'll do business with you or join your community or follow you. Would you turn down that speaking opportunity? What do you think most people say?
Yeah.
They say no. But
Yeah.
if you convert that into podcasting, they go, what do you mean I only have 100 listeners or 150 downloads? What do you mean that's all I have? So I'm glad that you said that, because I've been standing on a soapbox preaching it seemingly for the last 4 years. So thank you so much for definitely confirming what I've been saying for all that time. Let's talk about some of the challenges that people have in the organization or the community nonprofit space, because I think that there are a lot of nonprofits or communities that feel podcasting is definitely out of reach. What do you say to those folks who are in that space?
Well, one thing I would say is that you're already doing it, right? You're already doing the outreach, the donor, you're trying to get donors, you're trying to reach your community. And, I've heard people say that, I have the help for you, but I can't find you to give you the help. So a podcast can help you find your audience, not just your listening audience, but the people who consume the services you have. And the more you're meeting the needs of your community, the more attractive you are to donors, right? So it's like a podcast can be that central place where your donor meets your members meet your client community, the people you serve. And I think that, again, it's a perception that, a podcast, is like a television show. I couldn't do a television show because the budget, a podcast can be started, just have someone else do it. And because you already have a foundation, which is your nonprofit in your community, serving people with donors, you already have that set up. Most people who start podcasts just start a podcast, from scratch. But you're not really starting from scratch. And there are people like, there are lots of people like Carl who could help you set that up, without budget becoming a problem, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it stands to reason as well that there's an evolution in how we're getting our messaging out. So it used to be for community groups, organizations, not for profits, even communities in general, especially tourist communities, because I live in one. So I'll use that as an example. You would either use your local newspaper, you would leverage posters, flyers, everything in the community, any bulletin board, you could post something, an event and a happening, or you'd leverage your local radio station if you were lucky enough to live in a community that had one. And if you were even luckier to be in be a small city, but a good size, a fair enough size to have its own small, even if it's a community television station. Great. Here's the challenge. People don't listen to the radio like they used to. People don't watch television like they used to. People are using these things, these devices that we carry around in our pockets, which are more powerful than computers of even 5 years ago, let alone, going back way back when. So people are gravitating towards podcasts and other online forms of communication because that's where it is. So it only stands to reason that, and not to mention that the younger generations, so Gen Y, Gen Z, and what's after Gen Z? I forget. Somebody told me. Anyways, those generations, they're already tapping into podcasts. So when they start to become, if they're not already, start to become, contributing members of society, part of the economy, and they're traveling and they're visiting places, or they're making contributions, or whatever it is that they're doing, they're going to likely find the information, firstly, online, and second, they're already listening to podcasts. Why wouldn't you put your information out there through a podcast?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
my whole theory anyway. So I don't know if you agree with me on all of that or.
No, I totally agree because you have to go where your audience is, right? I mean, we talk about that with social media all the time. What are you offering and where are the people you're offering it to? Where they're hanging out? And for nonprofits, they have to decide where their customers, are hanging out. And for them, they have two different types of customers, right? But the main people you serve are your customers and where they're hanging out. And how can you access them on a regular basis? Because you have to serve them to attract those donors. Otherwise, donors think they're just giving you money to sit around, right? The donors want to see you spending that money. And so you need to expand by reaching out to more people you could serve so you could attract those donors.
Well, look at even the evolution of nonprofits with how they bring in donations. It used to be you'd go to an event, write a check, or you drop money into a pail or something like that. And now a lot of transactions are digital, and even donations for larger campaigns, they're all online. In some cases, they're even using apps now for those donations. So technology is allowing us to do that. So of course a podcast makes sense. Okay. So what are some of the steps then, if I'm in the not-for-profit space or I'm a community-based organization, what are some of the steps that I should take to get schooled or to get started in the podcasting space? What would you suggest?
Well, I would suggest the first thing is to reach whomever your development person is or, your executive director. Just need to reach out to someone and start learning about how a podcast can help your organization. I wanted to back up and say, there was a time when we used to hold events, so we could raise money, and we had to all this planning going into these events, all this money spent on these events, because I've run a nonprofit and I know how much work it takes, how many volunteers it takes, how much money it takes to put these events on so you could come out ahead and make some extra money. A podcast doesn't involve all that work, right? So I would reach out to someone, or, I have Nonprofit Monthly, someone like Carl, which is Podcast Solution Makes Simple, and just learn about how a podcast can help your organization. Because I think that's the first thing, is to be convinced that it can help you, right? So just talk to somebody.
And not to And thank you so much for directing people to Podcast Solutions Made Simple. I
It is
appreciate
where
that.
it is. Yeah.
I'm not paying you enough. I should pay you more. But seriously, but not to diminish your skill sets as well. As a mentor, that's somebody who can definitely help you figure out, especially if you're in those early stages, what's the why? We talked about mindset, so we have to go back to that. What are the other two things? So mindset was one. What are the other two that folks need to think about?
The other one, and nonprofits can relate to this one, a mission statement. Every podcast needs a mission statement. All organizations need a mission statement. And the third one is mentorship.
And you may have noticed that it's MMM, mindset,
Yes.
mission statement, mentorship.
Yes.
So the three M's,
The three M's. Yes.
three things that you need before you even worry about what kind of microphone, how long should my show be, structure of your content. Should I have guests? Shouldn't I have guests? All of these things that it sounds like folks that before they even get to the stage where they're talking to me, they should be talking to you to at least get themselves mentally in where they need to be and start thinking about this as not just I need a show, how can I get one? Because I think that's what happens. And I think we talked about this off microphone before we started recording, is that a lot of folks come into the podcasting space, they stay here for a few months and then they leave. And that develops a huge amount of podfade and podcasts that end up in purgatory because, and I know this is your mission. Your mission is to banish or eliminate some of that because there are so many great opportunities in this space.
Yes, yes. And I think doing it that way is putting the cart before the horse. And once you get beyond the mindset thing, the mission statement is like your blueprint. It's you, who, you, what, your why, basically, right? And you can always come back to that mission statement. And once you have that mission statement developed, it's hard to fail at podcasting. And if you think you don't need a mentor, think again, because a mentor doesn't have to be a high level relationship that's always in your business. It can be somebody who's there for you without, man, I'm going to tell you a story if you will allow me. I was in an Airbnb in Austin. I met a guy who had a podcast. He stopped recording in 2016. He had like 3 or 4 episodes. And Carl, I'm listening to this podcast and I'm laughing and I'm smiling and I'm like, because it was very good. And this guy have like 200,000 followers on LinkedIn. None of them was listening to his podcast. And I said, why did you stop? Oh, there was just something with the audio. It just didn't sound good. And if I was his mentor and he had picked up the phone and dropped me an email and said, can you listen to this? I don't really like this. 8 years without his podcast, just because of one little thing. That's the gap I feel. That's the 2 millimeter gap I feel.
That 2 millimeter gap, it doesn't sound like much, but it's huge. It's kind of like the longest distance traveled is the one between our ears, right? The longest journey or the hardest journey is the one between our ears because we get stuck in our heads, which is why I'm glad that you have mindset here because again, it's the mindset of, and not just mindset about podcasting, but mindset in general about things that you can cover. Oh my goodness. Oh, we could probably talk for hours upon hours upon hours, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to have to definitely have you come back is to do a deeper dive into something else about podcasting, because I think we're cut from a very similar piece of cloth. We believe the same things. Our philosophies are very much aligned. Maybe we'll be hosting a podcast together someday.
Oh, that would be fun.
As opposed to just being guests on each other's podcasts, which, by the way, I had the opportunity to be on Rosemarie Francis's podcast back in, I'm trying to remember when it was, but it was several months ago. Great opportunity. So we're doing the podcast swap thing here, but man, certainly a lot of value you have brought to the table today. You mentioned about mentorship, and that is something that you are passionate about, but you also have and we mentioned this in your introduction, you have the podcubator. Talk about that a bit, because I know that's where you want to send people after today.
Yeah, so the Podcubator is just what it sounds like. It's a podcast incubator, and it's a community I'm building, and to have podcasters who are at that stage, with that fledgling stage, just trying to feel their way through the craft, have a community where they could talk about their situation and get solutions to those problems. I had one guy from, I think he was in South Africa. He had a Swahili podcast and he was struggling because he said, I can't do this because I have no money. I don't know how to get money. And I told him, I said, go down the street and find a couple of stores that sell, his podcast was about tech. Find someone who will willing to sponsor your podcast. And 2, 3 days later, he emailed me and said, I got a sponsor for my podcast. And I said, wow, that's amazing. That's why I do this, because this guy now can do his podcast because he got a little money from someone down the street. That's what the Podcubator does for you as an aspiring podcaster.
That's a phenomenal testament right there, just from what his experience was. So we'll make sure that the link to the Podcubator, it's podcubator.com, but we'll make sure that that's in the show notes so you can click on it, find out more about it. Also, all of J. Rosemarie Francis's contact information will be there for her LinkedIn. And of course, the official website as well. We'll put that there too. Oh my goodness. This has been a phenomenal conversation, as I said already. But before I turn you loose, I want to give you the opportunity to leave us with the final thought.
Yes, if you want to start a podcast, just go ahead and do it. It took me 6 years to start my first podcast. Don't be me. And because there's so much help out there. That's the one thing I know about the podcasting community. We're very helpful and we don't always have our hand out for money. We will help you with whatever you need. So don't delay. Your audience is waiting to hear your message.
That's a great place to leave it. And I couldn't agree more. So many great resources out there. And yeah, we are a very fun, close-knit, supportive community. So
yes.
J. Rosemarie Francis, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Carl. It's my pleasure to be here.
And hey, thank you for being a part of the show today. So glad you could join us. Believe it or not, I can't work this magic by myself. So thanks to my amazing team, our audio engineer, Dom Carillio, our sonic branding genius, Kenton Dilborowski, and the person who works the arms, all of our arms actually, our project manager and my trusty assistant, Jilabel Tiongo, known to us here simply as July. If you like what you heard today, let us know. You can leave us a comment or review or even send us a voice note. And if you really liked it, we hope you'll share it with your friends and your colleagues. If you don't like what you heard today, well, please feel free to share it with your enemies. And if you know of someone who would make a great guest on the show, let us know about it. You can get in touch with us by going to our show notes where all of our connection points are there, including the links to our website, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well. And if you're ready to be a guest on podcasts or even start your own show, let's have a conversation. We'll show you the simplest way to get into the podcasting space and rock it. Because, after all, we're Podcast Solutions Made Simple. Catch you again next time.